Hello everyone, thank you for joining. Today we are going to talk about scaling in the cloud. And what are the universal pros and cons of vertical and horizontal scaling, in what cases each of them are more suitable, how scaling and resource allocation differs if you run projects in virtual machines or in containers. Also, how a proper scaling can solve a right-sizing problem, as well as what tools can help to automate the scaling processes. Let's move on to the next slide. So my name is Tatiana Fedorenchik. I'm the Global Product Marketing Director here at Virtuozzo, and with me today, Heike Roost, Senior Sales Engineer at Virtuozzo. Hi, Heike.
Thanks, Tatiana.
Yeah, we'll be glad, guys, to hear your questions in order to have a productive discussion. So don't hesitate and use the questions tab or chat during our conversation, so we can address them at once or at the end of the webinar. And before moving on with our topic, let me introduce in short one of Virtuozzo products that is designed specifically for scaling, with scaling in mind, Virtuozzo Application Platform. So while building this solution, our team thoroughly investigated everything around scaling, clusterization, CI/CD automation, in order to meet the requirements from our DevOps customers with a variety of different use cases. This turnkey PaaS automates creation, scaling, clustering, security updates, in general, management of applications, as well as providing intuitive self-service portals for both service providers and for their end customers. And container virtualization underneath ensure high density and better scalability, and we'll talk about this later today. The platform is available as public, private, hybrid, and multi-cloud in more than 100 local data centers around the world, and it can be installed basically on anything, on bare metal or any infrastructure as a service. So now let's dive deeper into the scaling world. Heike, can you please tell us more about scaling options available nowadays?
Yes. So let me start. So the typical scaling is you are increasing your amount of memory, you are increasing your amount of CPUs. That's called vertical scaling. That's a simple and easy thing. It works with all applications, but it has some downsides I'm discussing later. So the horizontal scaling is simply adding more environments or more call it applications. Like you have one web server and you are adding a second and a third one, and you are balancing between this your loads. That's called horizontal scaling. So what are the big difference now between horizontal and vertical scaling? So for vertical scaling, it's very simple to deploy. You don't have to take care on your application. It simply works out of the box. You can increase. You don't have to change your code. You don't have to change your let's say application, because you don't need to synchronize data between different nodes. It's because it's one node only. No, so it's not complex from terms of management. It's very cost effective. It has a minimum overhead here, and of course, if you have instances with large memory available, you can scale, let's say, to a pretty or high environment. And it's a very fast way to boost. For example, if you increase the number of CPUs, that works out of the box, and you don't have any issues in terms of connecting the nodes. If you have two different, let's say, VMs or containers or apps running, you normally need to synchronize this. If you are going with a horizontal scaling, in terms of a vertical scaling, it's simply, you don't need it. No, it's very simple. But of course, it has some downsides. No, it's by design not high available, because it's simply one, for example, virtual machine running on one node. If it crashes, it's down. So it's no high available. If you want to update your environment and the environment is rebooting, hey, your application is down because you only have one virtual machine or one container or running. It's hard to migrate if you want to change special things, and you probably can scale up in some environments in terms of memory or in terms of CPU, but down scaling is not possible. So it has a lot of limitations, and it has some pains in terms of scaling. Let me jump now to the horizontal scaling. The horizontal scaling is the best in class for a full big production because it has no limits in terms of theoretically number of servers, for example. You can have hundreds of web servers running and it scales very well. But you can't have a server with tens of terabytes of memory, for example. So you can't have one single server which is going extremely big, but you can have a lot of servers that's easily scalable. There's theoretically no limit. It's by design, let's say, fault tolerance and high available. So if one virtual machine or application fails, the other node which is running takes over the load and is running. It's simply like, for example, a DNS server in the world or a web server. That's how it classically works. It scales absolutely linearly with a number of virtual machines or containers you are running, and you can really scale to extremely high loads. Now, if you have a very high load, you can better scale with the horizontal than with the vertical scaling. Well, there are existing tools which assist it, so you need some knowledge, you need some special technology to make the balancing possible, because not everything is running out of the box fully in a horizontal scaling environment. And today it's a must for any larger scale business critical production environment. The cons, of course, there are negative effects or cons on it. So, for example, you need to know the knowledge on the application, how to distribute the data, what's scalable, how to synchronize the data, what's possible in terms of load balancing. Of course, you probably need some more resources because you need more virtual machines or more containers, and it's also depending on your application. Some applications need a special license, no? So it's not available for horizontal scaling. You need a special paid or commercial version instead of a free version. So there are some downsides, and the most important, in my opinion, is increased load and management complexity. So you need to have a lot to manage, a lot to think on each application. It always differs a little bit, and you need to take care on your network, how it works, and that is really fast. So that's high level the difference between horizontal and vertical scaling.
Sorry, so what you're saying is basically, if we are talking about some smaller projects or like non-production projects, vertical scaling can be enough, and like standalone installations with just vertical scaling can be enough. But if you're talking about like growing, about like large scale applications, there is no way to omit and to avoid horizontal scaling, and the customers and like anyone is really need to face the complexity on how to properly customize and set up it. Yep. So one of the things scaling help to solve is right sizing problem, but only if it's properly configured. Because if you overallocate resources, you will pay for unneeded resources. So you are going to like pay for something you're not really using, And no one wants to do that. And these days we are hearing about cutting costs necessity and like that how much costs are overpaid in the cloud. At the same time, under allocation can lead to downtimes, and we all know it is no good for business and for the reputation and for the running projects, especially in production mode. So, Heiko, can you share with us how the choice of virtualization underneath can influence how this problem is solved?
Yes,
whether you're getting with virtual machine or container.
Yeah. So typically, if you are running in environments today, they are running in virtualized on some sort of hypervisor, and virtual machines have some have the right sizing problem, call it this way. And if you are deploying a virtual machine, it has, for example, 4 CPUs and 16 gig of RAM. And the 16 gig of RAM is always consumed by the virtual machine, no matter if your applications are running at that moment. If the application is really needs that amount of memory, the resource is used by the virtual machine. There are some hypervisors trying to do some magic with some of the resources, but still a VM has this issue of wasted resources in terms of, for example, mostly memory or CPU resources. So the container, how we are doing it in our Virtuozzo Application Platform, we are always using containers for it, but we are using operating system containers. The difference in operating system container is that we do not reserve memory for the full container. So each application inside of a container only consumes the memory it really consumes, the application consumes, not the container consumes. So all the other available, technically available memory can be used by something else. So it can be shared between different customers, different workloads or whatever. So a container by itself is not a full virtualization. It feels like a virtual machine, but it's more or less like applications running isolated on an hypervisor. So in a vertical scaling, if you are doing VMs, you need to increase your VM size. So you change in OpenStack or in a environment, you change the flavor. In a VMware environment, you change the number of CPUs or memories on your virtual machines configuration. So you are upgrading in big steps from A to B. There's no smooth going on, and you at sometimes need to stop the virtual machine, for example, and start it again. If you change something, you probably can't add CPUs live to increase the number of CPUs, or you can't add memory live. It always depends on operating system and on hypervisors, of course, but you have these limitations in a lot of cases. And in some cases, you even need to migrate your data. If you need much more resources, you need to migrate your data of your disk to a different host, for example, because you need much more memory, which is not available on the current hypervisor host. You need to go to different ones. Yeah, you need to migrate your data, and it probably has some downtime. Yeah, the case. So containers really use, besides that, only what's needed. So you don't need to upgrade ever. You only need to configure some limitations. No? So the minimum you want and the maximum a container should use, that's the only thing. But between that, you can absolutely linear scale. There's no issue. And if you want to change these limits, you can change them on the fly. There's absolutely no influence on that. And in terms of scaling, the granularity we are using here is we name Cloudlet. The Cloudlet is like a combination of memory and CPU. So that's a combination we learned from thousands of practical installations. That's 128 meg and 400 megahertz CPU is a good combination. And if somebody or some application needs the resources, you simply add cloudlets. So you have 1 cloudlets, 5 cloudlets, 10 cloudlets, whatever, assigned to environments. And they can scale up, granularity up and down without any issue, but always in the number of cloudlets. So let me show how this looks in a real environment.
Yeah, and while Heiko is turning to the demo, I just wanted to add, like, this cloudlets is a very small scaling step. So this is not something like as with a virtual machine that when you need more resources, you need to buy twice bigger machine. Here, with very little scaling step, you can granularly grow or reduce the resources based on the load. To meet any over allocation, like, and overpaying for unused resources.
So let me create a classical environment. So that's a user interface, a customer user interface of our platform as a service environment. Let me create a new environment. We call it environment because it can include more than one container. And therefore, I will show it to create a new one. So let's make a pretty simple one. We have in this case a simple web server, okay, running PHP. And here is a cloudlet are coming in, 128, 400 megahertz. And I can say the limitation. So I can say, okay, I want to have a maximum as a customer of 18 cloudlets and the minimum of 1. So 1 is really reserved for me, and it's always using 1 cloudlet. And in the end, I have to pay for it as an end user, but I can scale up to 18 cloudlets in this example, or up to 30. And if I have this configured, I immediately see on the right side that the price for this web server would be from $2.20 to $80 if it would consume the full month, 24 hours, a day, all resources. No? So that's the maximum price. You exactly know what's your price on this and how it works. So this can be done, the scaling. Also, if you say, okay, I want to have a database now. And I want to have an Apache web server, including a database. And I can configure the database to have 15 or 16 cloudlets. I also can type it here in and can say, okay, I want to have 16 cloudlets consuming. So this environment now has a web server and has a database server. It's already 2 applications, and the magic is going on behind. So the connection, the environment, if I would press create, it automatically creates the configuration files, the connections, the database users, so the web server is connecting to the MariaDB server. Everything is working, and I can scale that pretty well up and down. And I can also edit it later. It's totally flexible to scale it up and down. Of course, we can also put a load balancer in front of it if it makes sense for a single environment, but in many cases not. Or we can provide, for example, a virtual private server, so a VPS, which by design is like a virtual machine where you can put your own applications on top of it, and you can deploy a CentOS, a Debian, or Ubuntu, or even Docker images from this environment. And exactly the same way. So if I add for example, CentOS 7.9 VPS, I can scale that VPS in the same way as the application is done. So it's it feels from the application point of view, if you're installing your personal special application in it, it's like a virtual machine, but you can scale it, linearly scales up and down, and you can define the minimum, the reserved space, and the scaling limit for here.
Yeah, it's good to add here that, for instance, if you track your application load. And you see that basically every single day, every single hour, specific amount of resources are consumed. And you know, like predictively that this is going to be like that. Then you can just set up reserved cloudlets to higher number and like specify this number of predictable load for this matter. And then you're going to pay less for those reserved resources. But scaling limit will give you opportunity to grow and to overcome any kind of load spikes. And you're not going to pay for the whole scaling limit that you've set up on an everyday basis or hourly basis. You are going to pay only for the specific resources that are going to be actually consumed within these limits, not for the limit itself.
Thanks, Tatiana. So let me explain now what's going on with horizontal scaling. If we do a horizontal scaling, we are adding virtual machines or containers again to the classical environment. Each container can have, of course, itself a vertical scaling, so it's scaling, and since we are doing everything with containers, we are not wasting and sharing all the space. So that's how we do. Let me show how this works in our platform. So let me create again a new environment. Let's use again our Apache web server with a resource which we defined for scaling limitation. But now let's scale the web server horizontally. Okay, our environment was created, which we created 2 minutes ago. So let's now change the number of web servers. I want to have a web server environment. This web server, this web application should have 2, 3, 4 web servers. What now happens? It scales horizontal. It will create 4 containers with 4 web servers, and they are either stateful. So if I change it later as in a stateful, it's like a copy of the existing web server, or they are stateless. They are created from a fresh instance, and only the configuration is copied over from the internal Git. So that is a difference in terms of stateful and stateless. But you have seen a load balancer is automatically created, because if you want to have 4 web servers, they don't magically work, not because you need some tools, and the tool is a load balancer. And the load balancer, which is here, still can be scaled. It can be scaled up in terms of cloudlets, but if I look there, it's only 1 web server and 1 load balancer. If I want to have the load balancer also high available, I can say, okay, I want to have 2 load balancers. And now I have high available load balancers, 2 ones, and I have also high available web servers. And if I want to add a database to my web server, I can also say, okay, this database has a vertical scaling, but I can also do horizontal scaling. And we included a so-called auto clustering. We call it auto clustering. If we switch this on, and we configure, for example, the type of auto clustering, like primary or a primary secondary, we can automatically create a database. And not only we are creating the containers with the database, we are configuring all the replication internally, all the redundancy. And again, magic, there was a proxy SQL. So for load balancing between all these 2 MariaDB primary servers, we automatically created a proxy SQL server on top of it. So it's fully working, high available. So you don't need the full knowledge. If you say, okay, I want to change it, it automatically creates the proxy. It automatically creates a load balancer if you need more than 1 web server. So it helps, and you don't need to configure all these things. All the magic is done behind the scene. And if I now press create, it will create. It probably takes 5 minutes or so, and it's automatically created. But I already have an environment, an example environment here created. and I can later on edit it, for example. So that's an existing environment, similar environment, with a load balancer, with an Apache web server and MariaDB and a redundant MariaDB database. So that's how it works in terms of horizontal scaling. And always you see on the right side the minimum and the maximum price you get for this if you go to the limitation.
So yeah, this is like more about horizontal scaling, like manual horizontal scaling, plus opportunity for automatic clusterization for databases or some servers. Can you show how this can be automated, how the horizontal scaling, same as vertical, can be automated?
Yes. So of course you can always monitor environment. If you need something more, you can manually edit. But for horizontal scaling, you can easily also do outer horizontal scaling in our case. And outer horizontal scaling is here already some triggers configured. You configure triggers. So let's say I want to have a trigger for my load balancer here. You can select which one, or for the database. Let's do it for the load balancer. And I want to have the load balancer to be outer horizontal scaled if the load in terms of network, if you see here, you can select it, disk IO or whatever, is going higher than 80%. And then we automatically add a node. And we can say the limitations. So probably we can say, okay, I want to go to 10 nodes maximum, and it will automatically add one by one a node. And and it also scales down if you want it. So if you don't have a trigger for scaling down, it will only scale up. But in this case, if you want to say remove node, if the load balancer is getting lower than 10% loaded for more than 10 minutes, it will automatically scale down to a minimum of 2 in steps of 1. And now we configure the trigger for automatically scaling up and down for the load balancer. And this can be done, as you see here, on the application server level, on the database, and also on the load balancer level.
Perfect. Yeah, and everyone is like the owner of this environment is going to be notified every time when the load goes up or down and the automatic horizontal scaling is applied. Like so, there are not going to be any kind of surprises. You will be notified that this node is added or that node is deleted from your environment, and the reconfiguration is going to be done as well automatically. So this not requires any manual interaction afterwards.
And some notes about all the redundancy going on. We call it smart container distribution. So if they are automatically or manually created containers, they are of course distributed smart onto different nodes. So if we have 2, for example, load balancers, they are distributed between different physical nodes to make it high available and to make it redundant. No?
Yep.
Some notes about special applications before we come to Q&A. I already mentioned you can also deploy like a CentOS VPS and put your own application on top of it. So we have developed a so-called cloud scripting. It's a scripting tool for automation your own application. So if you want to have a special application and you have developed your own application, you will have hooks in terms of from the cloud scripting, and depending when, for example, our environment thinks, okay, I now reached 90%, I'm scaling up, I will add a node. So you get some hooks, some notifications internally, for example, after the scale out and so on, and your application can be configured. So you can develop your own applications scaling out pretty well with the help of this cloud scripting. Yeah,
basically this cloud scripting tool is used inside the platform for scaling the servers, scaling like automatic horizontal scaling, automatic vertical scaling, as well as automatic clusterization that Heiko was showing. And all the applications and plugins and services that are stored in our marketplace, they are packaged with the help of these cloud scripting. But in addition to that, as Heiko mentioned, you can use this tool to package your own applications or your own services and automate the processes inside, processes like scaling or clustering or even deployment and everything around that. So now we are getting closer to the end, and do we have any questions, guys? Okay. Let me check in the chat. Like, guys, if you have questions, you can go to the chat, or you can also leave your questions in the questions tab. We have a question about recording. Yes, this webinar is recorded, so we're going to share it afterwards with all entities, so you can share it with your colleagues and friends and rewatch it again if needed. Sure. And anyway, if you're going to have any further questions, maybe after rewatching or like consuming all this information, you can get back to us using the website contact form or via the email. So you can get in touch with us. If you have any questions, drop them and we will get back to you and help you with the configurations. And again, the platform that Heiko was showing, like the dashboard that was shown today, this is Virtuozzo Application Platform. And it is available for the end customers across like 100, even more than 100 data centers from our partners, service providers around the world, locally in different countries. So you can go to any of them and you can get started easily to try how that works. And if you are a service provider and you're interested to offer the same type of services, the same type of functionality for your customers, you can get in touch with us and we will provide you with POC and with demo accounts to get deeper dive in that. Okay, it seems to me there might be some other questions. What's the difference compared to Kubernetes scaling? So Kubernetes inside Virtuozzo Application Platform is also scaled in the same way as other containers, because Kubernetes in Virtuozzo Application Platform is built on top of system containers, same as other like application servers and databases that Heiko was showing. Heiko, maybe you can move back to the dashboard to show like the scaling of Kubernetes. So basically for the Kubernetes nodes, you also set up the scaling limit and yeah, just go to the plus and in the plus, just, yeah, in, not really here. Can you go to the plus, like below? Yeah. Here we have extra services Kubernetes, like you can choose any version. And you see here, there can be also vertical scaling of each node inside, like reserved and scaling limit of cloudlets. And same for the horizontal scaling, there can be added nodes to this cluster. Okay, when are you using horizontal trigger for both CPU and memory? It goes in loop. When for sure you need to be careful with making the configurations of the horizontal triggers, especially if you're putting these triggers for single layer, like for application server, for instance, and or for databases. But it's very unusual for the load to go like in the situations when it's going up and down, like on the same on these two triggers. So basically, when you have the trigger for horizontal scaling for the application to add nodes based on the RAM, and delete based on the CPU, for instance, you just need to be sure that you have enough distance in between these notions not to have this loop, not to face this loop. Like get higher add nodes value and lower remove nodes value for the other trigger. Any other questions? And again, Heike, maybe you have something to add, because I've started to answer questions like myself, not sure why. Okay, so we have also a question, how can I get a trial? As I was mentioning before, yeah, you can go get the trial from any of our service providers, and their choice is available also on our website. I will share the link right now with all the, let me check where. I'm not sure if you're getting the answer here. Heike, can you open the link so we can show the catalog of our service providers? I've sent you the link in the Slack if you can find it. Because we have a full catalog of different service providers who are offering Virtuozzo Application Platform on top of their data centers. So you can go to this link, virtuozzo.com application platform partners, and there you can choose the partner based on the location, based on the pricing, based on the like support level, because we are measuring them from different options, as well as based on the performance, and choose the most appropriate for you and go ahead with the trial. Yeah, here it is. So yeah, as you see, there is the filtering mode where you can just choose any partner you want to go with. Each of them are providing the same Virtuozzo application platform. They can differ based on the performance or location, but the functionality is the same. The only difference can be in marketplaces, because some of the partners, they enlarge marketplaces with cloud scripting that we were mentioning today. They package some extra services or applications and add them to the marketplace, so the list can be bigger. Okay, so other questions. Does the presented platform work together or on top of existing Virtuozzo cluster installations? So this platform can be installed on top of existing installations of Virtuozzo, like Virtuozzo hybrid infrastructure or Virtuozzo hybrid server. If you have either of them, this platform can be installed on top of that. In addition to that, the platform, as I was telling in the beginning, the platform can be installed on bare metal or other infrastructure as a service solutions. Do you have docs about install and use? So currently this platform, when we talk about the full installation of this platform on top of your hardware and top of your installations, maybe of other Virtuozzo products, is done by operations team of Virtuozzo. So you need just to send the request we provide you the requirements for the hardware and everything, and we will help you to install it. So you don't really need to do that yourself. So we can help with that. For some cases, we also have automated installation, but I would say that the installation with our team can be like more smooth here. And again, for end customers, they just don't really need to install it themselves. They just go to the service providers who already offer that and get started. Same for the reselling purposes. If you're interested in reselling, but not like full installation, you can partner with any of those mentioned service providers who are offering us, and they can have a dedicated region for your dedicated installation within their own data center with like reselling option of this platform as well. And yeah, if you have your hardware, your data center, and want to offer that to your customers, just get in touch with us and our team will help with the installation. And surely we have documentation, we have like wide documentation for the end customers, how to use this platform, and also separately we have documentation for admins who are going to manage that, like from the service provider's perspective in terms of any directions. Okay, so I'm checking if we have any other questions because we are already over time. Okay, it seems to me we covered more or less everything. Like last 2 minutes for you guys to still be able to ask any questions, so go ahead. If no, then we'll be ready to move on. Great, no questions so far, but as I mentioned, if you're going to have any further questions, get in touch with us either through the website form, contact form, or using the email info@virtuozzo.com, and we will try to follow up with all possible answers that you require. Thank you for joining us and have a great day, evening or afternoon, depending on in what location you are. Thank you, guys.